Okay, so I'll kick us off. Tove, just a few days ago when we first met, we had a great conversation about how you see and how your lab at Sally sees the future of the relationship between creativity and AI. The way you framed it to me was thinking about preferable outcomes and preferable futures, which I thought was delightful and refreshing. And I thought maybe we could start with hearing some of your thoughts in that framing.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to start by quoting an architect, because we're in this amazing building here. So Cedric Price said in the 60s that technology is the answer, but what is the question? So I think that's how we think about technology. It's not inherently good or bad. It doesn't have its own intentions, but in its capacity, it does what we ask it to do. So that's why we need to be very intentional with how we apply technology, and especially this extremely powerful technology that has potential to change everything. So we use this method called a future cone, where we look at possible futures. So the further away we look, the more possible futures there are. There's not just one future. And some of them are possible, plausible, probable, and projected. But we focus on the preferable ones. So what if we get it right? There's so many things that could go wrong. Andrew named a few of them. But what if we get it right? What if AI really does help us become more creative, have better lives, a better planet? So that's how I think we need to think about it in order to be able to steer in the right way. So that brings me to my first question to you. Let's see if this works now. Yes. So speaking of possible and probable futures, I mean, that's changing. Something that was impossible or improbable just a year ago is now becoming reality. So you work at a company that said it was AI first 7 years ago.
That's right.
You're launching hundreds of new products and services in AI.
At least.
How do you keep up with the pace?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer personally. Twitter, if you look at Twitter, it's awash with pace. It's like hype. There's so much happening every single day. Every day there's one of these new game-changing announcements with like 4 red alert emojis around it, a thread. Everything you knew since yesterday is about to change, and you're trying to keep up with that pace. And it reminds me a little bit of the Web3. I think we can call it a craze now. I don't know if that's allowed or not, but Web3 from previous years, where it's just the speed of information, the rate of change is so rapid. But there is, I think, a key difference in this moment, at least from the perspective of a designer trying to understand how these technologies will impact our daily lives and the people that we design for, and that there's already real features, real impact, real meaning from the recent era of AI technologies reaching both our scaled products. So like Gmail, for example, starting to have features like this show up. You're seeing it in Microsoft products. You're seeing it in players like Notion and Airtable and many others, but also like new categories entirely, like ChatGPT obviously introduced something that feels net new. When I think about keeping up and when I think about being a designer in this space, I return often to this anecdote in my mind of how we're thinking about LLMs as part, and diffusion models as well, but LLMs as part of the technology we're designing for. Being really more than just a database with a mouthpiece attached to it, like a talking Wikipedia, which I think is a lot of how we're seeing the first implementations of bringing the technology to bear, and trying to really more deeply understand that they can be thought of as reasoning engines that could be part of the technology stack itself and how we build products and at every step of the product. It doesn't always have to be a chat bot. It doesn't always have to be forward in the interface. I think the capability overhang that still exists inside of like today's technologies is so huge that it's almost it's so challenging to think about tomorrow because there's still so much to do today with what's currently available and has been sort of left on the table, so to speak. So yeah, I think it's still an early stage of development, and if you're trying to keep up, I think you have to just keep swimming, keep swimming harder. Yeah. Okay, cool. So then I click this. Okay, great. And then, so to segue that a bit, you spoke a bit about your work at Sally, about how you guys are thinking about preferable futures. And I thought it might be nice for us to hear a bit about how you as a leader are seeing generative AI and AI technologies impacting creative work, maybe for you and for your team and for the teams around you inside of Sally and Doberman today.
Yeah. Yeah, so EY Doberman is it's kind of complicated. It's like EY, and then we have Doberman. EY Doberman is the design agency. Then I run a future lab within EY Doberman.
Right.
So it's been insane. These months, we've implemented AI, I think, in almost every process, in every project, in every part of the design process. So I could spend 20 minutes talking about just how we're using it. It's in proposal, in sales, in mood boards, we create personas or type customers that we kind of bounce concepts and ideas of, which works scarily well. Because for average users, and then you have to talk to real people too, of course. But I think the way that we are approaching it is we're trying to figure out, like, what do machines do really well and what do humans do really well? Because my worst case, my unpreferable future is like the AI-generated logos where people go like, hey, you can make your own logo now. It's like, that hurts my design art. Or you create the typeface from generative AI. But the first shitty draft, the tedious stuff you do just to get to average, you can kind of leapfrog that now. So you can get the shitty first draft.
Shitty drafts are free now.
Yeah. It's like in seconds almost.
Yeah.
So we can use it to take us to like mediocre or good.
Yeah.
But we need to get it to great, to emotional, to unique, to interesting. Because I think we've seen so many Gandalfs in spacesuits riding a banana. It doesn't.
Balenciaga Gandalf.
Yeah. I feel it doesn't move me.
Corny.
I mean, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's like a cool trick.
Yeah.
But it's not. It doesn't have human ingenuity, the real feeling of art inside of it.
Yeah, so that's what we're trying.
Taste. Yeah.
But one thing that we're actually using it for now is we're creating our own application that is with Whisper, OpenAI's API for listening to conversations. So we take it into a workshop or a meeting, and then we ask it, like, what was missing in this conversation? Like, what critical perspectives did we miss? What did we bias towards something? And my favorite is like, what's the elephant in the room?
Yeah.
That also works scarily well.
Yeah. I think this is when I'm saying a reasoning engine, I'm thinking about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like a sort of thought partner that's not just a speaking database or a automatic paintbrush.
Yeah.
Something that's actually working with you to push the work further, to feel like it's a real partner with you, a collaborator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have the computers do the shitty first drop, but add the humanity after. Don't just replace designers.
I love that.
I think that's
I love that.
the wrong
Couldn't
way.
agree more.
So we're going. So we're talking about everything changing. One thing that hasn't really changed that much in tech is the interface. It's been, we were clicking, now we're tapping. We had like 10 years ago or something, there was a big no interface trend, Golden Krishna. I was super excited about it, never materialized. So is this it? Are we gonna finally see a new interface?
Very light question.
Yeah, tell us.
I'm reminded of an anecdote. So when I was in graduate school, I was at the media lab at MIT, and my professor Hiroshi Ishii he's sort of a famous human-computer researcher himself. He had a 4-foot printout of Doug Engelbart's face in a frame in the second floor atrium, sort of peering down on us at all times. And obviously, Doug wasn't Xerox PARC, and he was SRI. But the point was to always remember the mother of all demos, which I assume a lot of people in this room have seen, and if you haven't, you should watch. But it's really the first human demonstration of what it meant to connect a keyboard and a mouse to a GUI, and then show usable expressions of how the technology might actually be, let's call it tangible for people. And so I think that we've experienced another big enough change in the underlying fundamental technologies in software design, that's AI, to expect that there's a new era of HCI coming that ought to lead us somewhere close to something like a mother of all demos. Once again, I don't personally feel like we've seen that yet. I think that the current interfaces that we're using to talk to LLMs are chat interfaces, and I think that fits the bill for the way that the models are being trained, and it's familiar and it's easy to use. but it's also slow and it's also limited. And I also miss the GUI when we're inside of that interface. And so I don't think it's an end of an era. I would suggest that it might be we have a new ingredient in the kitchen, and we might need to recook and reshape the cake around that ingredient. And that's incredibly exciting. But definitely there's a lot of work to do and a lot of opportunity for designers in the world to be thinking about that from first principles. I think what excited the world in the mother of all demos is it took these technologies that were otherwise abstract or locked away in academia or sort of obtuse, hard to understand, and it presented them in real, usable, tangible forms that people could look at and say, oh, I can do that kind of work with a computer, or I can do this kind of work with a computer. And it didn't talk about taking jobs away. It didn't say, hey, you're not going to have an accountant anymore. You're going to have this thing on the computer, a spreadsheet. But it did show the world the possibility of how the tools could come together to take human tasks and automate them, to make human tasks more approachable with the support of a computer, which I think is a segue into our next question here.
Very smooth.
Yeah. Which is, Tove, to hear your perspective on the balance that you see between jobs being created through the new era of AI versus jobs being maybe changed or lost or altered, and what your current perspective is on that matter.
Yeah, so this job loss question, I mean, we're looking at it completely wrong, in my opinion. So imagine traveling back. We have an AI-generated time machine here. We're going back 100 years, telling people like, hey, in our time, machines do our job. They would be like, whoa, what? That's amazing. Now I can learn this instrument or far more, And we come back to present day and it's like, machines take our job. We're like, no. The Goldman Sachs, they predicted 300 million jobs gone from AI soon. That should be a good thing. Looking back at the 40-hour work week, I think in the future would be like, what on earth were we doing? We were stressed out, burnt out, not seeing our kids, not spending time with our loved ones. So let the machines take the jobs. The big problem now, obviously, is the economy, is that we're not sharing the effects and the rewards from this efficiency. So I think there's never been a better time in human history than right now to talk universal basic income. Yes, an income guarantee, universal basic services. I mean, we're creating all this wealth. We should enjoy that. I mean, take up a hobby, spend time with your loved ones. It's a good thing.
What's the anecdote you shared with me just an hour ago? It was a paradox where when we find ways to be more productive,
Jevons paradox.
Yeah, could you give that? Yeah.
So the cheaper and more efficient we make things, the more energy we end up using. So it's a really bad news for climate, because the more we make things efficient, the more energy we use. And it's kind of the same with time-saving products. Like, we've had so many things that's like, this is going to help you be more efficient, save more time. Who here feels like you have time over?
Yeah, it's certainly not me.
Yeah, we're more stressed out than ever. So, I mean, my preferable future is like machines are doing our accounting and the boring jobs that we don't really want to do, and humans can make poetry and
make art.
Yeah, and hang out.
And think about awe and beauty and the things that feel innately human.
And it might seem like many here are probably thinking like that sounds super utopian and improbable. But there have been so many trials with universal basic income where the effects are amazing. Society saves so much money because you take away poverty, you make people healthier, the well-being is better. So it's like a win-win. We just have to share, we have to tax, we have to distribute wealth. That's a tangent, but I think
that's a really great perspective.
That's what's going to take it to the preferable future.
I've been making the joke lately that AI has done nothing but make my work harder and make me work harder.
I'm so
maybe someday it will actually make things easier. It could be that I work in AI, so that could be the condition. But thank you for sharing those thoughts.
So. Moving on to this, my preferable future, where I'm playing the piano and hanging out with my kids. The machine is doing the hamburger menus and the footers. that requires a whole lot of trust in these systems. And we've been talking about hallucinations, which I think is a very kind word for errors. So how do we make machines that we can trust enough to make it do important and hard tasks?
Well, the clear answer is you put a little 8-point typography on the top of the input field that says,
Beware.
don't trust the bot, period. And then you're good. And then you have it say, as an AI language model, I sort of only know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to keep going and just complete the sentences. Obviously, that's not going to scale. From a design perspective, and the way that we think about this in my work with my team, is to re-examine our principles and the principles by which we design the systems for the user so that they understand their relationship with it, the parameters of the relationship, and the constraints of the technology. I think a big change in the types of designs that we're doing today is that failure is an option, which is a new way to think about how what used to be deterministic with the GUI as a set of representations of instructions that the machine could take in and follow very deterministically, there's now this non-deterministic, call it a dialogue, call it whatever you want, relationship between the user and the computer talking to the machine. And that doesn't mean failure in the model or failure in not being safe. So we have to get through safety and trust first. We have to make sure that we have great evals, that we have adversarial testing that's durable and works. But even beyond that, I personally, as a user of these technologies myself, see that it is not always what I'm expecting when I reach into the system and ask it to do something, or I collaborate with it as a partner in a process. And needing to model the software around that sort of now fuzzy field of what it means to work with a computer, I think changes everything down to the core of how we design software and what software could potentially, the relationship we share with software as mediated by these AI models. So that's where I go to with trust. I think that as a designer, our job isn't just the interface now. It's also thinking about the way that the models are designed, how they're trained, how they're tuned, what their weightings are, how that shows up and is represented in the interface, how that builds and engenders a relationship with the user over time and through time. These are all the things now that a modern designer who's, like we'll talk about an LLM developer now at Google, like we see a cohort of developers that are LLM developers. There are also a cohort of LLM designers, AI designers that need to be thoughtful about trust as part of the system coming from the ML all the way to the UI. So yeah, something in that category.
Yeah, but it's gonna be a challenge.
It's an absolute challenge. It already is a challenge. Yeah.
With the election coming up and this monsoon of misinformation, and so yeah, it's to beware.
Yeah, the cost of generating information has been driven marginally down to zero, it feels. Maybe not, yeah, so.
Maybe that's a new topic in schools, teaching our kids misinformation and how to
think for
to
themselves.
deal with that.
Yeah, how to think for yourself, how to be, yeah. I was sharing this with you earlier, but I was in, are we okay? We're almost at time, but I was in high school, I think, when Wikipedia came online. I was maybe a freshman at the time. Maybe it was middle school. I don't even know. It feels like a long time ago. But there was a small tremor through academia then about the legitimacy of using Wikipedia as part of your research process for a school paper, which now feels like, nothing in comparison to the challenges that are being faced today. But it does feel like another magnified version of that we're dealing with. How do you verify what you see, what you read, what you know, what you create and put into the world as your own creation? How do you verify that sort of thing? Okay, moving on. You shared with me this great idea of the sea of sameness. And also, are we okay on time? I think we have 1 more minute.
Lauren, you yell when we have to get off stage.
Because the timer started, I think, at... anyway, so maybe we'll wrap up with this question.
We'll wrap it up quickly.
Okay, we'll wrap it up here. So you shared with me this concept or this idea that the last 10 years of using tools was sort of a sea of sameness, which I loved the alliteration of the sea of sameness, I think, which we had all been feeling. And maybe to wrap up, you can talk a bit about how you see this current era of technology as an opportunity to sort of shake us out of that sea, to wake us up in the dream, the sort of collective dream of sameness that we've all fallen into.
The past 10 years has really been the templatification, is that a word, of the web and digital and design, because we've commodified it. And there's a reason for it, because some of you might remember a program called Flash. It was web designer's wet dream back then, if you could say.
It was the best.
Yeah, it was the best. And I was working with Nintendo doing this Wii Mario Kart campaign site, and we did the navigation was like a big wheel. They had to turn. Cool. It was so cool. It was completely useless. I mean, it was so hard to use. So, I mean, kids never innovate navigation. Like, we had too much freedom back then, I think, in a way, because now we're making it more useful, easier, streamlining stuff. But we've lost, we lost the fun, I think, in design a bit. And the worst case scenario with AI would be everything is the Gandalf in a spacesuit on a banana, that kind of aesthetic. Like, I don't know why I picked that specifically, but I think you know what I mean. This, like, the Mid-Journey look, and everything is kind of a copy of a copy of a copy. But I think if we use it to spark our creativity, we use it a lot at Sally, because we do preferable futures and try to visualize and manifest futures that could be, things that don't yet exist. So we're like coming up with beautiful visions of Stockholm that's re-greened with less cars and more pathways and more basketball courts, and it's so amazing, and it triggers so many emotions, and it helps us take the things further, because it helps us be more innovative and creative. So ending on that maybe as the preferable future of design and AI.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.